Dad raised his glass and said, "Some people send checks and call it love, but family is built by the ones who stay." My brother Evan lowered his eyes like a humble saint. I looked at the brown envelope beside my chair and knew Christmas was about to lose its manners. The Hartwell house looked perfect from the street, which was always its first lie. White columns, green wreaths, warm porch lights wrapped around the railing. The kind of Charleston home people slowed down to admire before driving off to gossip about how blessed a family must be to own it. Inside, the dining room smelled like roasted turkey, buttered rolls, mashed potatoes, pecan pie, and hot apple cider. Mom had set out her good china, the blue rim set she only used on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and whenever Dad wanted the family to look better than it felt. I had driven more than 300 miles from Atlanta that morning, after finishing a week of disaster recovery audits. My job was not glamorous. I did not stand under spotlights or cut ribbons. I sat with insurance files, relief grants, loan documents, and families who were one bad signature away from losing the roof over their heads. So when people talked about homes as if they collapsed only from storms, I knew better. Sometimes a house fell because someone lied on paper. Sometimes it fell because nobody wanted to read the paper. I was 39, unmarried, childless, and living in Atlanta, which in my father's private court of family law made me nearly suspicious. My brother Evan lived 10 minutes away, brought his kids over on Sundays, sat beside Dad at church, and always knew where to place his hand on our father's shoulder when someone important was watching. That was the difference between us. Evan performed devotion. I paid for the damage after the performance ended. He sat across from me now in a navy sweater, clean-shaven, smiling softly, while his wife Bethany passed cranberry sauce to their 2 children. Bethany wore pearls and the patient expression of a woman who believed being local was a moral achievement. Mom kept asking me if I wanted more sweet potatoes. Dad kept talking about the old days of Hartwell and Sons construction, when his crews repaired porches after hurricanes and neighbors still shook his hand outside church. I listened. I smiled when required. I kept my purse close to my ankle. Inside it was the envelope I had not wanted to bring to the table. Bank notices, default history,
Payment records, Evan's emails, 3 years of just one more month printed in black ink.
I had planned to speak with him privately after dinner. One last chance, one clean way out. A foolish little kindness, apparently, because humans would turn mercy into furniture if you let them sit on it long enough. Dessert came out. Pecan pie, whipped cream, coffee. Dad stood. He tapped his spoon lightly against his glass, and the room went quiet in that trained Southern way where everyone smiles before they know whether they should be afraid. "I want to say something," he began. Mom looked proud. Evan looked ready. That was my first warning. Dad spoke about legacy, about the Hartwell name, about the company he built with his hands, his back, and a faith that could outwork fear. He talked about family duty, about showing up, about the people who stayed close when parents got older. Then he placed his hand on Evan's shoulder. "After the new year, I'll be updating the family trust and the LOC management agreement," Dad said. "Evan has proven he's the one to carry this forward if I can't. The company, the house, the family name, they need steady hands." My fork rested beside my plate. Not dropped, not slammed, rested. Because I finally understood. Evan had known. Maybe he had even pushed for it. Dad turned toward me. His face softened, but not kindly. It was the look he used when he wanted to sound wounded while holding the knife. "Some people send checks and think that is love," he said. "But family isn't built by bank transfers. Your brother stayed. That matters." Mom whispered, "Warren." Too small, too late. Evan stared down at his pie as if praise embarrassed him. Bethany's mouth curved just enough to be cruel without leaving evidence. I looked at my father, then at my brother. "Dad, I said, keeping my voice even. Did you review the financial records before making that decision? His eyebrows pulled together. Don't lecture me in my own house. There it was. The house. The kingdom. The place where truth needed permission to sit down. Evan cleared his throat. Lydia, it's Christmas. Can we not turn everything into work? I looked at him long enough for his smile to twitch. Work. That was what he called the disaster he had fed me for 3 years. Missed payments, hidden extensions. Mom's signature on documents she barely understood. My savings used as a sandbag while he kept standing in family photos like the golden boy with clean hands. I reached down, opened my purse, and took out the brown envelope. Mom's eyes followed it. Evan's color changed first. I set it in the center of the table, right beside the pecan pie. Dad stared at it. What is that? The part Evan didn't report, I said. No one moved. Even the children went quiet, as if some ancient animal had entered the dining room and every decent instinct told them not to breathe too loudly. Evan leaned forward. His voice dropped. Lydia, don't do this. I looked at my brother, the son who stayed, the man everyone praised for holding up the family. You had 3 years to do this privately. Dad reached for the envelope. Evan's hand lifted, then stopped. That small hesitation told me everything I needed. A house doesn't fall because the roof is weak. Sometimes it falls because everyone keeps praising the man holding the match. Dad slid one finger under the flap and pulled out the first stack. The dining room still looked like Christmas. Candles burned low, coffee cooled in china cups, pecan pie set untouched beside the evidence. But the air no longer belonged to a holiday. It belonged to a hearing. Dad read the bank letter first. His mouth tightened around notice of default. Then came payment history, wires from my account, and emails Evan had sent after midnight when courage was expensive and my phone was convenient. Please don't tell Dad yet. I just need 1 more month. Mom can't know her name is tied to this. Dad looked at Evan. Evan looked at me. Dad, he said, you need context. Liars loved context. It gave a rotten thing softer lighting. Then give him context, I said. Evan sat straighter. Material costs jumped. 2 clients delayed payment. I was protecting the company until cash flow caught up. By asking Mom to sign documents she thought were insurance forms? Mom's hand went to her throat. Evan? His jaw tightened. They were routine business papers. No, routine means clear. It does not mean handing your mother a pen while Dad was recovering and telling her not to worry. For once, Mom did not soften my words. Dad slapped one page against the table. The cups rattled. You paid these? He asked. Yes. How much? Enough to keep the file from going where Evan feared it would go. Bethany lifted her chin. Do not pretend you care about my children after humiliating their father on Christmas Eve. Her voice was church lobby smooth. Your children are not the reason this is painful, I said. They are the reason adults should stop lying before the bill reaches them. Evan pushed his chair back. You come down from Atlanta and treat us like one of your failed nonprofits. My failed nonprofits usually keep better records. Enough, Dad snapped. No, Warren, Mom whispered. Everyone turned. She had not said his name like that in years. Not as a wife asking permission, as a woman hearing the floor crack under her feet. Mom reached for the copied signature page. You told me this was coverage paperwork. Evan rubbed his forehead. Mom, I explained enough. Enough for her to consent? I asked. Or enough for you to sleep? Dad's face darkened. Lydia, watch your mouth. I have watched my mouth for 3 years, I said. While Evan called at midnight? While he asked for 1 more month? While you praised him for staying close and looked at me like distance was a crime. Evan leaned forward. You wanted control. You could have helped quietly, but you saved everything for a scene. I did help quietly, I said. That was a mistake. Bethany folded her napkin with slow precision. So what do you want, Lydia? Applause? No. I want the trust amendment stopped. I want an independent review. I want Mom and Dad to have their own lawyer before they sign one more page. And I want Evan to stop using my silence as part of his business plan. The room went still again. This time it was recognition, late and unwelcome. Evan whispered, You are destroying me. I met his eyes. No, Evan, I am refusing to keep financing the version of you Dad likes better. 3 years earlier, Evan called me at 11:43 on a Thursday night. Recovery files covered my kitchen table in Atlanta. When his name appeared, I almost let it ring out. Evan did not call late unless he wanted something wrapped in panic. Lydia, he said, I need you not to react. That is how people announce disasters they had time to create. He said Hartwell and Sons had a cash flow problem. A supplier raised prices. A client delayed payment. A remodel ran over budget. Nothing Dad needed to worry about. Then he sent me the bank letter. A demand letter does not care how old your family name is. It says cure the default by a date certain or consequences begin. I read it twice before I spoke. What collateral is tied to this? Evan went quiet. That silence was the first honest thing he gave me. He admitted there were extensions, cross-collateral language, and papers Mom had signed. First, he said she understood enough. When I pushed, he changed it to she trusted me. Those were not the same sentence. Mom had signed because Evan told her the forms were insurance and compliance updates. Dad had just had his heart checkup. Evan said delaying could risk coverage and upset Dad. So Mom signed at the breakfast table, believing she was keeping peace. I paid the first shortage because I saw her name and imagined Dad learning the truth from a bank attorney. I told myself I was buying time for honesty. Time, in the hands of a desperate liar, is not a bridge. It is a basement. I hired a retired controller to review what Evan sent. I negotiated a payment arrangement. I told Evan he had 30 days to tell our parents. He thanked me like a drowning man gripping a rope. 30 days became 60, then 90. Every deadline brought a new story. A check was coming. A client had promised Friday. The equipment loan needed breathing room. Evan never asked if I could afford it. He asked like the answer had been settled by blood. When I visited Charleston, Dad would clap Evan on the back and say, "This one keeps the lights on." I would stand 10 feet away, knowing which account had actually kept them on. Mom would touch my arm and say, "Your father misses you, honey. He just wishes you were here more." Here. As if love were measured in miles, not sacrifice. Once, I told Dad we needed an independent look at the books. He frowned. "Evan is here every day. He knows what's going on." He did. That was the problem. Another time, I asked Mom what she had signed. She gave me that tired smile. "Your brother said it was routine. Please don't stir things up while your father is feeling better." So I carried it with resentment, spreadsheets, wire receipts, and a locked folder named Household Repairs. Evan learned my silence had weight-bearing value. Dad learned nothing. Mom learned peace could be purchased by not asking questions. Silence can look like loyalty from the outside. From the inside, it feels like swallowing glass. Back at the Christmas table, Dad still held the proof. For the first time that night, he was not looking at me as the daughter who left. He was looking at the cost of believing I had. Dad kept turning pages as if the next one might save him. That was the sad thing about proof. People did not reject it all at once. They searched it first, hoping for a corner loose enough to peel away. Evan stood beside his chair, one hand on the backrest, knuckles pale. "Dad, This looks worse than it is. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because that sentence had kept half of America's family businesses alive just long enough to die badly. Dad lifted one email. You wrote that your mother's name was tied to this. Evan swallowed. In a limited way. In what way? Dad asked. Evan glanced at Mom, then away. A paperwork way. A paperwork way? I repeated. That is a beautiful phrase for tricking your mother into signing documents she did not understand. His eyes cut to me. You don't get to stand there like you are pure. You were part of it. That landed exactly where he aimed it. For 3 years, that had been the hook in my ribs. I had paid, I had waited, I had told myself I was protecting Mom from panic and Dad from another heart scare. But Evan had counted on that mercy like it was a line of credit. Yes, I said. I was part of keeping the first fire from spreading. You were part of lighting new ones. Bethany shook her head. You make everything sound criminal. I make it sound documented. Dad pushed his chair back. Enough with the clever answers. They are not clever, Dad. They are overdue. Mom sat frozen, her napkin twisted in both hands. The children had been sent into the den by then, where a Christmas movie played too loudly, full of bells and cheerful lies. Evan lowered his voice. Lydia, please, we can talk tomorrow. No. The word surprised even me. It came out calm, clean, almost kind. No more tomorrow. No more one more month. No more private rescue after public insult. Dad's face hardened again. He knew how to handle tears. He knew how to handle anger. He did not know what to do with a daughter who sounded finished. I turned to him. You cannot sign the trust amendment. You cannot give Evan broader control over the company or this house until an independent review is done. This is my house, Dad said. And Mom's security, and your retirement, and apparently collateral Evan was willing to blur whenever panic got expensive. Evan snapped. I was trying to keep Dad's company alive. You were trying to keep Dad's opinion of you alive. The room went quiet around that, because there it was, the little God everyone had been serving. Not the company, not the family, not even the house. Dad's opinion. Evan had fed it with Sunday dinners, church handshakes, smiling family photos, and hidden debt. Dad had rewarded it because it looked like devotion from a comfortable distance. Mom had protected it because challenging men in this family had always felt like dropping a glass on tile. And I had financed it because I thought truth would break them. Funny, the things we call love when we are afraid. I picked up my coat from the chair. From tonight on, any discussion about the company goes through Julian Mercer or an independent accountant. I will send you his contact information. Mom, do not sign anything Evan puts in front of you. Dad, get your own estate attorney to review the trust. Mom needs separate counsel too. Dad stared at me. Separate counsel? For your mother and me? We are not strangers. No, I said, but married people can still need different protection when one of them has been kept uninformed. Bethany stood. You are making this sound like some courtroom drama. Bethany, your husband used my money, Mom's trust, and Dad's pride to hold up a company he would not honestly manage. If that sounds dramatic, take it up with the facts. Evan's face twisted. You always thought you were better than us. No, I said. I thought if I kept helping, you would eventually tell the truth. That was worse. That was stupid. Mom flinched at the word, but I let it stay in the air. I had earned the right not to polish every sentence for her comfort. Dad's voice dropped. He stayed, Lydia. I looked at the man who had raised me to balance a checkbook before I could drive, that somehow forgot every lesson when the son he favored handed him a story he liked better. Being close to the house does not mean you are protecting it, I said. I walked toward the foyer. Behind me, Evan said my name once. Not angry this time, smaller. I did not turn around. At the front door, I heard Mom begin to cry again, but beneath it was something new. Paper moving, pages being gathered, proof no longer lying alone beside dessert. I stepped into the cold Charleston air with my keys in my hand and 3 years of silence finally off my back. The front door opened before I reached my car. "Lydia, honey, wait!" Mom's voice shook behind me, not the polished tremble she used at church when something touched her heart. This was rawer, smaller. The sound of a woman realizing the peace she had protected had been eating one of her children alive. I stopped on the porch. The wreath on the door brushed against the wood in the wind. Across the street, someone's inflatable Santa leaned sideways, like even he wanted no part of the Hartwell family Christmas. Mom stepped out without a coat. Her arms crossed over her thin sweater, but I knew she was not cold enough to go back inside. "I didn't know," she said. I looked at her. "I believe you." Relief crossed her face too fast, so I finished. "But you also didn't want to know." The relief disappeared. She gripped the porch rail. "That isn't fair." "No," I said. "It wasn't." She closed her eyes. For most of my life, Mom had been gentle in a way people praised because it did not cost them anything. She remembered birthdays, mailed thank you cards, brought casseroles to grieving neighbors, and could make a guest feel loved before the coffee finished brewing. But inside our family, her gentleness had a darker twin. She made pain quiet. She folded it, tucked it away, and called the room peaceful. Every time Dad cut me with a sentence, she said he didn't mean it that way. Every time Evan made me sound cold, she asked me to understand his pressure. Every time I asked about money, papers, signatures, she looked tired before I finished the question. "Mom," I said, "I tried. I asked what you signed. I asked why Evan needed extensions. I asked Dad to look at the books." Her mouth trembled. "Your father had just had the heart test, and Evan knew that." The words landed between us like something dropped from a height. Mom looked toward the dining room window. Through the glass, I could see Dad's shape moving slowly. Bethany standing stiff near the sideboard. Evan bent over the table as if he were the injured party and not the architect. "He told me the papers were routine," Mom said. "He said if I delayed, it might cause problems with coverage." "I know. I thought I was helping. I know that too." She looked back at me, and for the first time that night, she did not ask me to soften the truth so she could survive it. I lowered my voice. "But when I pushed, you told me not to stir things up. You told me Dad didn't need stress. You told me Evan was doing his best. He is my son. I am your daughter." That stopped her. Not because she had forgotten. That would have been easier to forgive. She remembered I was her daughter. She simply assumed I could bear more. Older daughters often become the family's spare beam. Everyone leans, nobody checks for cracks. A charming system if the goal is emotional structural failure. Mom covered her mouth. "I am so sorry," she whispered. I wanted to hug her then. The old part of me did. The part trained to rescue the room, rescue the mother, rescue the feeling before it grew teeth. But I kept my hands in my coat pockets. "I don't need you to apologize because you didn't know," I said. "I need you to understand what happened every time you chose comfort over questions." She nodded once, barely. "What do I do now?" The question was quiet, but it was the first useful thing she had said all night. "Find every paper you signed. Do not sign anything else. Not for Dad, not for Evan, not because someone says it is routine. Put the originals in one folder. Send me copies tomorrow." She wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand. "Will your father hate me? For protecting yourself? For not trusting Evan?" I almost smiled. It had no joy in it. "Mom,
Trust is not letting someone lead you blindfolded. Trust is being able to ask where the road goes. The wind lifted a strand of her silver hair.
She looked older under the porch light, but also clearer, as if fear had finally stopped doing her thinking for her. Inside, Dad's voice rose. Evan answered, sharp and wounded. Mom flinched out of habit. Then she stayed where she was. That mattered more than any speech. She reached for my arm, stopped herself, and let her hand fall. Are you driving back tonight? Yes. It's late. I've driven tired before. Her face broke at that, because she heard what I did not say. I had done many things tired. Paid bills tired. Answered Evan's calls tired. Defended my own love for this family tired. She whispered, You should not have had to. No, I said, I shouldn't. For once, she did not explain Dad. She did not defend Evan. She did not ask me to come back inside and make the room easier for everyone else. She only stood beside me on the porch while the perfect Christmas house glowed behind us, full of food, paper, pride, and the first honest silence we had ever shared. Peace that costs one person everything is not peace. It is surrender. And that night, for the first time, Mom looked like she understood the difference. At 8:12 the next morning, my phone started lighting up. Not with apologies. That required imagination. Aunt Ruth Ann texted first. Call me when you can, sweetheart. Then came a cousin asking if I was doing okay after last night. That was how Southern families announced they had heard the story and were shopping for the version that made them feel least guilty. Evan had moved fast. By breakfast, he had called uncles, cousins, Dad's old foreman, and a deacon from church. His version was tidy. I arrived from Atlanta bitter and dramatic. I waited until Christmas dessert to embarrass him. I was jealous because Dad trusted him with the company. I used money to control people. Give a liar 12 hours, and he will build a porch on a burning house. Bethany helped in her polished way. She posted a vague sentence on Facebook about betrayal coming from the people who should love you most. No names, no facts, just perfume over garbage. I read it outside Columbia with bad coffee in my hand. For a moment, my thumb hovered over the screen. I could have ended it right there. Emails, payment records, bank letters with dates sharper than any insult. One upload, one family group thread, and Evan's version would have cracked before lunch. But documentation is not a tantrum. Evidence needs a clean table. So I called Julian Mercer. Julian and I had met at Emory years ago. He became the attorney nonprofits hired when a good mission had bad books. I became the woman who found the bad books. He answered on the third ring. Tell me you're calling about brunch, he said. Family trust. Hidden debt. Questionable signatures. A pause. Terrible brunch. I told him everything from the envelope to Dad's toast and Evan's midnight emails. Julian only interrupted to ask dates, names, and whether each document had come to me lawfully. That matters, Lydia, he said. If Evan sent you the emails, you can use them. If you paid from your own account, those records are yours. If your mother voluntarily gives you copies, preserve them. Originals stay intact. No screenshots online, no threats. He continued, colder now. If there's a trust amendment pending, your parents need independent counsel. Your mother may need separate counsel. And if any nonprofit money is involved, we treat that like a live wire. I thought of Low Country Home Relief Fund, the charity Dad started after Hurricane Matthew. Evan was treasurer. Bethany was secretary on paper. I had reviewed policy templates once, unpaid, from a distance. Send me everything, Julian said. But Lydia? Yes? Do not fight gossip with gossip. Let Evan spend his credibility. We'll spend facts. By the time I reached Atlanta, There were 17 unread messages. Dad had not called. Mom had. Her voicemail was mostly breathing, one apology that broke in the middle, and then, I found a folder. Inside my apartment, I opened my laptop and made 3 folders: Evan emails, bank records, mom documents. Then I created one more: public claims. If Evan wanted to build his defense on who seemed loyal, I would let him. Reputation can look solid for years while termites eat the frame. Mom called before noon. This time she was not crying. Her voice was thin and careful, the sound shock leaves behind. I found 3 folders, she said. Insurance, bank renewals, and one with your father's old company seal. Photograph the covers first, I told her. Then scan every page. A pause. You sound like this is evidence. Mom, because it is. The folders had been in Dad's roll-top desk, behind tax receipts and manuals. That desk had always smelled like cedar, ink, and my father's certainty. Now it smelled like Evan's panic. The first scan showed a consent form, then a loan extension acknowledgement, then a guarantee page with Mom's signature in blue ink and the date written in Evan's hand. Julian reviewed them and called me back. Her signature appears real, he said. The issue is disclosure and whether Evan misrepresented what she signed. He told her it was routine coverage paperwork. Have her write a dated note now, plain facts, where she was, who was present, what he said. By late afternoon, Aunt Ruth Ann called from Mount Pleasant. I knew something stunk, she said. She remembered a morning after Dad's heart appointment. Mom was making toast. Dad was asleep in the recliner. Evan came in with a leather folder and said he needed signatures before the bank closed. Marilyn asked if Warren should look, Ruth Ann told me. Evan said no, he didn't want to stress him. Then he stood right over her shoulder until she signed. Was Bethany there? In the driveway with the kids? She may not have known, but Evan knew exactly what he did. I wrote every word down. Patterns matter. One bad signature can be panic. Repeated signatures at weak moments become strategy. Near evening, Mom sent one last photo. A sticky note still clung to a form. Mom, signed by the ex. Just yearly compliance. E. 3 lines. Casual. Familiar. Poison wearing house slippers. When I called her back, she answered immediately. I feel so stupid, she whispered. No, I said. You feel betrayed. Don't let him rename it. The silence that followed was heavy with old excuses. Dad was tired. Evan was pressured. I was sensitive. Nobody meant it that way. Maybe. But harm does not need a perfect villain. It only needs someone willing to profit from your doubt. Put the original somewhere Evan cannot reach, I said. Your father will say I'm overreacting. Well, then let him. Overreacting is what families call protection when they preferred you unprotected. She did not defend him. I forwarded everything to Julian, labeled by date and source. My heart wanted to break furniture. My work brain wanted page numbers. Page numbers were more useful. That night, Dad finally called. I let it go to voicemail. Lydia, he said, tired and irritated. Your mother is upset. I need you to stop pushing her. Not what did Evan do. Not what did Marilyn sign. Just the old reflex. Make the woman asking questions quiet again. I saved the voicemail and created a new folder. Mom's documents. Evan had chosen that breakfast table because he thought trust made a woman easy to guide. He forgot trust also gives betrayal an address. Julian called the next morning. Lydia, why is Low Country Home Relief Fund showing up in a construction company cash report? I sat up on the edge of my bed. It shouldn't. Well, that is what I was hoping you'd say. The fund was Dad's proudest public thing after Hartwell and Sons. He started it after a hurricane left older homeowners under blue tarps. It paid for roof repairs, ramps, windows, mold removal, the work that lets people stay home. Dad used to say a community was not measured by the prettiest porches, but by whether the weakest roof got fixed before winter. That sentence had once made me proud of him. Now Julian was looking at the fund's name inside Evan's mess. He shared his screen. I saw vendor payments, reimbursement notes, and job numbers that did not belong together. A contractor Evan often used had received checks from the fund. Weeks later, credits appeared on Hartwell & Sons invoices. Not clean transfers. Something worse. Because it had been dressed to look ordinary. Could be sloppy bookkeeping, Julian said. Do you believe that? I believe sloppy bookkeeping is what guilty people call things before the second spreadsheet opens. The independent accountant, Mara Voss, joined the call. She had flagged 3 projects marked completed without homeowner confirmations. 2 had no final photos. 1 roof repair had a supply invoice but no labor record. Then she said the name that stayed with me. Evelyn Harrow, 74, widow. Her file says roof completed in October. Is there a completion form? No, just a note from Evan saying confirmed by phone. I wrote the name down. Bethany appeared too, mostly as board secretary. Minutes, signature lines, meeting packets. Her name had the look of furniture where men made decisions. That does not clear her, Mara said. No, I answered. But it changes where I look. Julian's voice sharpened. Move carefully. No accusations outside proper channels. Ask the board for an emergency meeting. Preserve records. Do not contact donors like you're throwing a match into dry grass. False numbers were not new to me. They were cold, irritating, correctable. Charity numbers were different. A missing dollar there became a room still smelling of mildew, a hallway without a ramp, a widow listening to rain find the same hole twice. If you're listening and you've ever watched someone in your own family hide behind a good reputation, leave a like and tell me in the comments what you would advise Lydia to do. The truth is just beginning to breathe, and what waits behind Mrs. Harrell's file will make silence feel impossible. I drafted the request for an emergency board meeting and sent it to Julian. Subject: Request for independent review of Low Country Home Relief Fund records. Clean, plain, deadly. By noon, Reverend Grace Bell replied that she would make time. Wayne Brooks answered 5 minutes later. Bring documents, he wrote. If this fund hurt people, I want names. Names. That was what Evan had tried to bury under categories. Vendor, project, family, routine, compliance. Names made lies heavier. And Mrs. Evelyn Harrow was about to become one. Mrs. Evelyn Harrow lived 40 minutes outside Charleston, where the road narrowed and live oaks leaned over the shoulders like old women listening. Her house was small, pale yellow, with 2 rocking chairs on the porch and a folded blue tarp near the side steps. I parked behind an old Buick and looked once more at her file. Completed, October 14th. Final confirmation by phone. Approved by E. Hartwell. Evan's initials had never looked so ugly. Mrs. Harrell opened the door before I knocked twice. She was 74, narrow-shouldered, with silver hair pinned back and eyes that had the caution of someone promised help too many times. You're with the fund? She asked. My name is Lydia Hartwell, I said. I'm reviewing records for Low Country Home Relief Fund. And my last name? Her face changed. Warren's girl? Yes, ma'am. That old Southern ma'am came out before I could stop it. Atlanta had not scrubbed Charleston for my bones. She let me in. The living room smelled of lemon cleaner and damp wood. Family photos lined the mantel. A Marine portrait. A wedding picture with her late husband. Then I saw the buckets. One near the couch, one beside a braided rug. Both empty, but water stains circled their plastic sides like proof that had learned patience. When it rains hard, I move the recliner, she said. Easier than fighting the ceiling. I open my folder on her kitchen table. The fund record says your roof was completed in October. She gave a small laugh with no humor in it. Completed where? A man from a crew had come by, she said. Not Evan. He took pictures outside, told her the work was approved, and promised they were backed up after the storm. Did anyone do repairs? One fellow put a patch near the back gutter. It lasted until the next real rain. She walked me down the hallway. In the spare room, a brown stain spread across the ceiling like a bruise. With her permission, I took photos. Ceiling, buckets, tarp, approval letter. I recorded her statement after Julian texted the exact language he wanted. Plain facts. No coaching, no drama. As if drama had not already been dripping into her carpet for months. At the table, she folded her hands. Your daddy helped my Henry after Hugo, she said. Wouldn't take full price. Told him, a roof is not a luxury when rain has a key. And that's why I trusted the letter. I looked down at my notes. There it was. The theft larger than money. Evan had borrowed Dad's good name, Reverend Bell's pulpit, Wayne Brooks' reputation, and the faith of people who believed a Hartwell promise meant a dry room. I can't promise how fast this moves, I said, but your file will not stay buried. She watched me closely. Are you in trouble for asking? Probably, I said. Mrs. Harrell nodded, as if trouble were not impressive to a widow who had outlived storms, bills, and men who confused volume with strength. Well, she said, somebody ought to be. Outside, the winter sky had gone the color pewter. I sent the photos to Julian and Mara before I started the car. A stolen dollar can hide in a ledger. A leaking roof cannot. And Mrs. Evelyn Harrell's ceiling had just testified. St. Mark's Fellowship Hall smelled like coffee, cleaner, and baked ham. A banner above the stage read, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, sweet enough to fool anyone who had not seen kindness twisted into bookkeeping. Evan wore a navy suit, pressed jacket, polished shoes, wedding ring bright. Bethany stood by the donation table, handing out brochures with the practiced smile of a woman trained to make a family look untroubled. Dad sat in the front row, shoulders stiff. He had not called since the voicemail telling me to stop upsetting Mom. Still, he came, because the Hartwell name was on the fund, and Warren Hartwell never knew how to leave a stage once honor had his fingerprints on it. Mom sat beside him. She had sent every document she found. She had not signed a thing since Christmas. That was not forgiveness. It was movement. I sat near the back beside Julian. He had a legal pad on his knee. Do not interrupt him, he murmured. I know. That tone means you hate knowing. That tone has served me well. Reverend Grace Bell opened with a prayer for families still repairing after storms. Then she thanked donors, contractors, and board members. When she mentioned completed projects, she named Mrs. Evelyn Harrow. My fingers tightened around the program. Completed. The word crossed the room in a clean dress, while Mrs. Harrow's ceiling still wore a stain. Evan stepped to the microphone. He said Dad taught him a good man used his hands for more than profit. Hartwell and Sons was built on trust. The Low Country was not just a place, but a promise. A woman behind me whispered, he is such a good son. There it was again. The cheapest halo in Charleston. Proximity. Evan continued, when storms hit, folks don't just need lumber and shingles. They need to know somebody has not forgotten them. Dad leaned forward, hungry to believe, because the lie had his son's face. Bethany clapped first when Evan finished. Then the room followed. I did not. Evan saw me near the back. For 1 second, his smile faltered. Then he recovered and stepped down to shake hands. That was his gift. Recovery, not repair. After the speeches, checks slid into envelopes. A retired couple gave $25. A widower gave $50 and said he wished it could be more. That was when my anger became colder. Evan had taken from people who wrote careful checks because they remembered needing help once. Julian and I waited until Reverend Bell moved away. Wayne Brooks stood near coffee urn, arms crossed. I handed Reverend Bell the packet. "Reverend, Mr. Brooks," Julian said, "we are requesting an emergency board meeting about project records and possible misuse of restricted funds." Reverend Bell's face changed. Wayne opened the packet and looked at the photo.
Mrs. Harrell's ceiling. His jaw shifted. Who else has this? Counsel, the accountant, and Mrs. Harrell's statement, Julian said. Wayne closed the folder. Then we meet before anyone gets a chance to clean a desk. Across the room, Evan laughed at Adona's joke, one hand over his heart like gratitude lived there.
The most dangerous lie is the one dressed for church, and his suit fit perfectly. The room had beige walls, a brass cross, and the sour smell of old coffee. Reverend Bell sat at the head, with Wayne Brooks beside her. Dad chose a chair near Evan, not close enough to touch him. Mom sat across from me, one folder in her lap like she was guarding a wound. Bethany came in last, composed from a distance. Evan wore the same navy suit from the fundraiser, the steady sun, the man people trusted with checks. Julian placed 3 packets on the table. "This is not about family embarrassment," he said. "It is about fund records, restricted donations, and whether beneficiaries were harmed." Dad flinched. Evan folded his hands. "Transparency matters, but storm season buried us. Contractors were delayed. Files got updated out of order." Wayne did not blink. "Then let's put them in order." Mara Voss opened her laptop and began with Mrs. Harrell's file. Marked completed October 14th. Payment issued to Palmetto Ridge Repairs. No signed homeowner form. No final photo. No labor invoice supporting a full roof replacement. Evan leaned forward. That crew was behind on paperwork. "Did they replace the roof?" Wayne asked. "They performed work." "That is not what I asked." Evan shifted. "I would need to confirm with the contractor." I slid the photos across the table. The buckets, the stained ceiling, the tarp. Reverend Bell covered her mouth. Bethany stared as if the pictures had been taken inside her own home. Julian turned to the next page. The fund paid Palmetto Ridge Repairs $8,600. 11 days later, Hartwell & Sons received a vendor credit of $7,900 from the same contractor. Dad looked at Evan.
"What does that mean?"
Mata answered. "Money left the charity for a project that appears incomplete. Then nearly the same value benefited the company." Evan's face tightened. "That is unfair." Wayne's voice dropped. "It is numbers, son. They do not care about fair." Bethany touched her packet. "Why is my signature on these minutes?" No one answered fast enough. "I never attended an October board meeting," she said. Evan rubbed his temple. "You signed them later. We had quorum by email." Reverend Bell sat straighter. "I did not approve that by email." Mar clicked again. 3 sets of minutes have secretary signatures, but no matching notices, attendance confirmations, or preserved votes. Bethany's voice cracked. "You told me they were late filings." Evan whispered. "They were." "No," I said. "They were cover." And his eyes snapped toward me. "Mom signed what you called routine. Bethany signed what you called late. Mrs. Harrell waited under what you called completed. That is not confusion, Evan. That is a method." Dad gripped the table. Julian opened the last packet. "We asked the board to suspend spending, preserve records, restrict Evan's access, and authorize an independent audit." Evan stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "You are letting her do this to me?" Nobody spoke. Not Dad, not Bethany, not Mom.
Wayne closed the folder with one flat hand. "One mistake is a crack," he said. "This is a blueprint." Evan looked around the Hartwell room and found no one willing to hold the wall for him. Julian did not raise his voice. That was why people listened. He slid one printed email to the center of the table, then another toward Reverend Bell. "Evan sent this to Lydia on November 22nd, he said. Subject line, bridge funds." Evan's face changed before anyone read it. Dad noticed. So did Mom. Julian tapped the highlighted line. "I can move the fund money back by March, but I need Dad off the bank calls until then." The room went so quiet, the heating vent sounded rude. Bethany picked up the page with both hands. Her lips moved over the words as if meaning might appear if she gave it mercy. Evan leaned forward. "That is being taken out of context." Julian nodded. "Then provide the context." "I was stressed. I was talking loosely." Mara Voss turned her laptop toward the board. "The dates are not loose. Payroll shortage on November 20th. Fund transfer to Palmetto Ridge on November 21st. Vendor credit to Hartwell & Sons on December 2nd. Your email falls between them." Wayne Brooks exhaled. "That is not loose. That is a roadmap." Dad looked older than he had at Christmas, stripped of the story that had held him upright. "Evan," he said, "did you use that fund to cover the company?" Evan looked at him the way boys look at fathers when the lie they built for approval has no walls left. "I was going to put it back." Bethany made a wounded sound. "You told me those minutes were late paperwork." "They were," he said. "No, they were a curtain." He turned on me then, because I was still the easier villain. "Lydia wanted this. She has wanted me exposed since Christmas." "I wanted you honest 3 years ago," I said. "Exposed was the price you kept raising." Dad rubbed his eyes. "We can handle this inside the family first." There it was, the old hymn. Quiet. Protect the name. Do not let outsiders see the mold. Mom's folder snapped shut. "No, Warren." Every face turned to her. She stood slowly. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "No, that is what we said when Lydia asked about the books. That is what I said when she asked what I signed. That is what you said when she warned us. Handle it quietly. Keep it in the family. Don't upset your father. Don't embarrass your brother." Dad stared at her. "Marilyn." "No." She looked at Evan. "You used my trust because you knew I would not question you. Then you used your sister's silence because you knew she would protect me. And you used your father's pride because you knew he wanted to believe you." Evan lowered his head. Mom's eyes filled, but she kept going. "I helped build this mess by refusing to look at it. I will not help hide it too." Reverend Bell placed her palm on the packet. "The fund will cooperate with an independent audit." Wayne nodded. "And Evan's access ends today." Dad did not object. That silence was new. It was not peace. It was the sound of control leaving the wrong hands. Evan sat down as if his bones had been cut loose. For years, he had survived on the family's fear of scandal. He had mistaken our restraint for permission. Keeping it in the family is how rot learns to spread. And my mother had just opened a window. Evan kept his head down for so long I thought he might refuse to speak. Then Wayne Brooks said, "Son, silence is not a defense. It is just another delay." Evan looked up. His face had lost the clean confidence he wore in photographs, at church, at Sunday dinners, beside Dad in front of a finished porch. Without the smile, without the posture, without everyone rushing to believe him, my brother looked exhausted. "I borrowed against time," he said. No one moved. Julian's pen stopped above his legal pad. "Explain that without poetry." Evan swallowed. "The company had receivables coming in. I thought if I could cover payroll and material deposits for a few weeks, the bigger checks would clear. Then I could put everything back. Everything? Reverend Bell said, meaning charitable funds. Evan's eyes flicked toward Dad. That old habit. Even now,
He checked whether our father still had a piece of him to protect. Dad did not nod. He did not rescue him. Evan's shoulders dropped. Yes, he said, some of it came from the fund. Bethany closed her eyes.
Mom pressed one hand against her mouth, but she did not look away. That mattered. The truth deserved witnesses who did not flinch just because it wore a son's face. Evan kept talking, and every sentence sounded like it had been locked inside him too long.
He said the first time was supposed to be temporary. A contractor was late. A client delayed a final payment. Payroll was due Friday. Dad had built Hartwell and Sons from nothing, and Evan could not stand the thought of being the son who let it sink. So you used Mrs. Harrell's roof as a bridge loan, I said. He winced. I didn't think of it like that. But that is exactly why you were dangerous. His eyes hardened for a second. You think I wanted this? No, I think you wanted the benefits of honesty without the humiliation of being honest. Dad's hand moved, then settled flat on the table. He looked at Evan like he was trying to recognize the little boy in old work boots who used to follow him around job sites. I gave you the company, Dad said. Evan's laugh came out broken. No, Dad. You gave me a shrine. You handed me your whole life and told me not to drop it. The words cut through the room. For the first time, Evan did not sound like he was performing. He sounded bitter, scared, and young in a way 43-year-old men hate to be. You wanted me at every breakfast, every church event, every donor lunch. You wanted people to say I was just like you. Lydia could leave. Lydia could be smart somewhere else. I had to stay and prove the name still meant something. Dad's face tightened. Do not blame your choices on me. I am not saying you signed the checks, Evan said. I am saying I was terrified to tell you I couldn't carry what you worshipped. The room absorbed that. I understood it. That was the inconvenient part. Evan had been trapped in a role too. The golden son, the steady son, the man who stayed. Dad had loved him with expectation until expectation looked like affection. But understanding is not absolution. Humans confuse those constantly because apparently words are hard. I leaned forward. Evan, pressure is not a permit. He looked at me. You did not fail when the company struggled. Businesses struggle. Good men ask for help. You failed when you decided Mom's trust was easier to use than your own honesty. You failed when Bethany's signature became office furniture. You failed when a widow's roof could leak because Dad still needed to think you were strong. Bethany opened her eyes then. Tears ran down her face, quiet and furious. You let me sign minutes, she said. You told me I was helping. I was trying to keep us afloat. No, she said, you were trying to keep yourself admired. That one landed harder than mine. Evan turned towards Mom. She did not soften. She waited. I'm sorry, he said. Mom's voice was low. For what? He rubbed both hands over his face. For giving you papers and not explaining them. No, she said. Said properly. Evan looked as if she had struck him. Mom's eyes shone, but her spine stayed straight. You let me sign because you knew I trusted you. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then, finally, he nodded. Yes. Dad looked away first. That was when I knew Evan had lost the crown. Not because the board had suspended him. Not because the records exposed him. Because for the first time in his life, Dad had no speech ready to make him noble. Evan sat at the folding table beneath the brass cross, stripped of every convenient title. Son who stayed, treasurer, heir, good man. All that remained was the bill for what he had done. And this time, it had his name on it. Reverend Bell called for a vote before Evan could gather himself. Her voice was steady, but her hand stayed flat on Mrs. Harrell's file, as if the paper might rise and accuse the room by itself. All in favor of suspending Evan Hartwell from all Low Country Home Relief Fund duties pending independent audit? Wayne's hand went up first, then Reverend Bell's, then slowly, Bethany's. Evan looked at his wife as if betrayal had balled her face. She did not lower her hand. The motion passed. Julian wrote it down. Mara Voss noted the time. Wayne collected Evan's fund keys, then asked for passwords, vendor access, and check authority to be disabled before anyone left the building. Evan's mouth tightened. "You think I'm going to run?" Wayne looked at him over his reading glasses. "I think men do foolish things when the mirror gets honest." Dad sat silent. That was almost worse than shouting. Warren Hartwell had spent decades filling rooms with certainty. Now he looked like a man watching his name get audited. Julian explained the next steps. The fund would preserve all records. An independent audit would review every project for the past 3 years. If misuse of restricted funds was confirmed, the board's attorney would determine reporting obligations and civil recovery. Civil recovery. Restricted funds. Reporting obligations. Cold words, but useful ones. They did what family language had refused to do. They put walls around damage. Evan finally spoke. "I can repay it." Bethany gave a bitter laugh. "With what, Evan? Another story?" He turned red. Mara said the first recovery estimate was not final, but the visible exposure already required a repayment plan. Evan would sign a civil agreement within 10 business days. Personal assets would be disclosed. No company money could be used to repair what he had taken from the fund. That last sentence hit him. His boat went first. The white fishing boat Dad used to praise when Evan brought it to family cookouts, saying a hard-working man deserved some peace on the water. Then the extra work truck he barely used, the one he kept because it made Hartwell and Sons look bigger parked outside the shop. Then a small parcel of land outside Somerville he had bought during one of his confident years. 3 trophies, 3 sale listings, 3 public hints that something was no longer right behind the Hartwell smile. Hartwell and Sons did not escape either. Mara recommended an outside controller to monitor cash flow, vendor payments, credit lines, and any transaction tied to family assets. Dad started to object out of reflex, then stopped when Mom looked at him. Not angry, done. That look did more than any speech. Dad called his estate attorney the same afternoon and paused all changes to the family trust. For once, Mom did not sit beside him as decoration. She retained her own counsel. Her lawyer reviewed every guarantee, consent, and signature Evan had placed in front of her. The Charleston house was moved away from the gray edges of company risk. No more vague collateral language. No more family pride hiding inside financial documents where it had no business taking up space. Bethany left 2 days later. She packed the children's overnight bags, school tablets, Christmas sweaters, and the little frame photo of them on Sullivan's Island. Evan stood in the doorway, looking wrecked and offended in equal measure. "You're taking my kids?" "I'm taking them somewhere the adults tell the truth," she said. She did not file for divorce that week. Real life, inconvenient creature that it is, does not always sprint toward clean endings. But she moved into her mother's house in West Ashley and told Evan that if he wanted a marriage, he would start with every bank account, every credit card, every loan, and every lie. Mom called me that evening. "Your father is quiet," she said. "He does that when the world stops agreeing with him." She almost laughed. Almost. Then she said, "Mrs. Harrell's roof?" "First priority," I said. Dad paid a personal contribution to bridge the repair while the audit sorted the rest. Reverend Bell found a licensed contractor outside Evans Circle. Wayne inspected the work himself, because old contractors trust invoices the way cats trust bathwater. I did not celebrate. There was satisfaction, yes, I am not made of marble. Watching consequences walk to the correct address has a certain clean beauty. But I also knew what had been lost. Trust. Years. A charity's good name. A mother's ease. A father's illusion. A widow's dry ceiling delayed because my brother feared being ordinary more than he feared doing wrong. Accountability is not cruelty. It is the bill finally arriving at the right door. Dad called on a gray Tuesday. "I'll be in Atlanta tomorrow," he said. "I'd like to see you." He did not ask to stay at my place. Progress. I chose a coffee shop in Decatur, not my apartment. Neutral ground. Public enough to keep old habits quiet. Private enough for truth to sit down. He arrived early in a navy coat, carrying a folder instead of his usual certainty. Warren Hartwell had always entered rooms as if someone owed him a chair. That morning, he waited by the door until I nodded. "Lydia," he said. "Dad." We ordered coffee. He paid too quickly, like 2 cups could cover something bigger. At the corner table, he opened the folder. Photographs slid out. Me behind a debate podium at 17. Me in a volunteer shirt after a coastal storm. Me holding a scholarship certificate while Dad stood beside me. "I found these in your mother's cedar chest," he said. I did not touch them. "I used to think you were running away from home," he said. "Atlanta, school, work, those files." I told myself emergencies gave you an excuse not to come back. "Oh, that was convenient." "Yes." Dad folded his hands. I was wrong. The words should have felt bigger. Instead, they sounded like a door unlocking 1 inch. "What are you sorry for?" I asked. "Not generally. Not because everything got ugly. What are you sorry for?" He looked down at the photos. One part of him wanted credit for showing up. The other was learning that late did not erase absent. "I am sorry," he said, "for confusing closeness with responsibility." I stayed quiet. I saw Evan at church, at dinner, at the shop, and called that devotion. I saw you in Atlanta and called that distance. His voice roughened. "I am sorry I rewarded one child at Christmas and punished the other with the same speech." There it was. Specific, ugly, useful. "I am sorry that you had to prove love by staying silent. That was never your burden to carry." "I tried to tell you," I said. "I know." "No, Dad, you do not get to make that small. You heard Evan because his life looked the way you respected. You dismissed me because mine did not." His face pinched, but he nodded. "You're right." Those words did not fix anything, but they did not dodge anything either. "I thought you were avoiding family," he said. "You were doing what I claimed to value. You ran toward people whose homes were falling apart. And when yours was, you told me not to lecture you." He closed his eyes. "I did. I am not ready to make this easy for you. I'm not asking you to. You are used to asking without saying it." That almost broke him. Men in our family arranged the air until women felt responsible for breathing softer. "If I want to be in your life," he said, "what does that require? Ask before you judge. Listen before you decide. Do not use family when you mean obedience. And never again make me the price of keeping peace." He nodded once. "I can do that." "Do it then. Don't announce it." When we stood to leave, he did not reach for a hug. He waited. So I touched his arm. Enough to say the door was not locked. Not enough to pretend it had never been slammed. An apology is not a key. It is a knock at a door you no longer own. The first audit report arrived in June, bound in black covers and colder than any speech Evan had ever given. Mara Voss listed missing forms, vendor credits, and projects marked complete without homeowner signatures. Evan had moved money, called unfinished work complete, and treated community trusts like spare change. The board rebuilt Low Country Home Relief Fund from the studs up. Large payments needed 2 approvals. Every project needed photos, homeowner confirmation, and audit review. Wayne Brooks said, "Charity without controls is faith begging to be robbed." Mrs. Evelyn Harrell's roof was finished by a contractor outside Evans Circle. Dad paid toward the repair to answer for damage done under his name. I visited after the first hot rain. Mrs. Harrell opened the door smiling. No buckets in the living room. The rug was dry. The ceiling had fresh paint. "Listen," she said. Rain tapped the roof and stayed outside. That sound was worth every uncomfortable room I had entered. Later that month, the fund held a small meeting at St. Mark's. No gala, no Navy suit speech, just chairs, coffee, and people who deserved honest accounting. Evan sat in the second row, thinner, quieter, reduced to human size. Bethany sat 3 chairs away with the children between them. Dad stood near the front. He admitted the fund had failed people it promised to help. He admitted he had confused a familiar face with a trustworthy system. Then he looked toward me. "There are people who stand close and only make the picture look complete," he said. "And there are people far away, doing the work that keeps the roof from falling in." No one clapped at first. Some sentences need silence before applause ruins them. After the meeting, Evan found me in the parking lot. He held out a printed confirmation of his first repayment transfer. "I know this doesn't fix it," he said. "No, it doesn't. I'm starting anyway." "Well, then keep starting, every month." I did not hug him. I did not absolve him. Humanity would have to limp onward without that convenience. When I drove back to Atlanta, a brown envelope waited in my mailbox. For half a second, my body remembered Christmas. Inside was a copy of the revised family trust and a handwritten card from Dad. "Lydia, you did not leave home. It took me too long to understand you were holding it up from where you stood." I placed the card beside my computer. People still needed roofs. Banks still sent letters. Families still mistook silence for loyalty. The truth had not destroyed my family. It had stopped us from worshiping the version that was already collapsing. I did not need them to crown me. I only needed the truth to stop kneeling. Life teaches this the hard way. A family does not fall apart because someone finally tells the truth. It falls apart when people call silence love and let the wrong person spend everyone else's trust. If this story moved you, please leave a like, share your thoughts below, and tell us where you are listening from. Thank you for staying until the end. Wishing you health, peace, and courage. Goodbye for now, and I will meet you again in the next story on Revenge Glow.